You live?
It's coming up. If you can hear us out there, we're about to go live. So start it. There we go. It looks like we've gone live. If you can hear us out there,
wave.
All right. Sorry for the slight delay there. Dave, why don't you get us going?
All right. Hey, folks. I'm David Goldstein, which you probably know if you're watching a live deep dive of us.
I am Brian Brinkman.
You're tuned into Beyond the Pond live deep dive number 3. This is a unique thing we've been doing on Sundays. Beyond the Pond podcast is, generally speaking, it's a podcast which Brian and myself utilize the music of Fish as a means of getting a listener to listen to other bands. It's usually not jam bands because we love Fish. We are Fish fans. Sometimes the problem is Fish fans get a bit myopic, especially in quarantine. Forget that there's other bands out there that they could be and should be listening to. And it's always been our goal at Beyond the Pond to get them to listen to those bands. Go beyond the pond.
Absolutely. It's our mission in life. It's our goal in life. And as we're all continuing, this is now week 3 of us doing this. We're kind of tracking time through quarantine here. I don't think that we knew when we first started this that we'd be doing it into April, but it looks like we go onward and the world goes onward as we deal with everything that's happened as a result of COVID-19. But we are here in early April to bring you a very special live episode. We are going to kind of change things up a little bit from what we were doing in the last 2 episodes. We're not going to focus on a single Fish show here. We're going to talk about top 5 lists. Dave, why are we talking top 5 lists here today?
We're talking top 5 lists because this is the 20-year anniversary of the John Cusack, Jack Black opus High Fidelity, which is a movie that I loved very much. Some would say it hasn't aged particularly well, but in terms of the aspect of just being a movie with pop culture obsessiveness, pop culture love, all things lists, all things friends getting together over liking certain albums and really caring about music. We choose to focus on that as opposed to the fact that the John Cusack character Rob is turns out to be a little bit of a psycho. He's not the nicest guy.
Not the nicest guy. No. His approaches towards relationships and love do not necessarily hold up, or would we recommend to anyone of our listeners in terms of ways to both get and hold on to women. It's just it was a different era, but what has held up with that movie is record collecting, nerding out over minutia when it comes to music, a general love of the larger and larger field of classic rock and where it spills out and peters out and where the little streams and tributaries go off from there, and the notion of ranking aspects of what you love about classic rock, which is something that we embrace. This is obviously art that we're talking about in a lot of ways, but as you'll see here as we go into this, Dave and I are huge sports fans as well, as many of you probably know. And the idea of ranking what was the best is a huge part of our overall show.
Definitely. Also, and High Fidelity had a really good soundtrack. That was
very good.
I will admit that was the first time I'd ever heard about the 13th floor elevators. So I think, a junior in college when it came out. So I probably should have known about them. But certainly, You're Gonna Miss Me makes for one heck of an opening salvo from that. But there's a lot of good songs in there. There's a great Stevie Wonder song. I Believe When I Fall in Love with You It'll Be Forever. There's an Elvis Costello song, Kinks. Is the Beta Band on the soundtrack? I know they're heavily featured in the movie. I forget if they're actually on the CD.
I think they are on the soundtrack, but I had the CD when I was in high school. I think I was listening to that track on there.
Right.
But yeah, great movie. So we're going to jump into our top 5 lists here shortly. Before we do that, there's 3 quick points of business that we have to get to. We'll try to get this as quickly as possible to get to our lists. First and foremost, we are currently in the midst of the Island Tour anniversary. Every April 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I go back and I do a big rewatch and re-listen to the Island Tour. I'm flirting with the idea of posting April 5th, 98 on our Twitter feed tonight and just live stream my thoughts, as it is a pretty ridiculous second set. We'll see how this show unfolds. But Dave, were you listening to the Island Tour this weekend?
I wasn't.
No.
Because I've heard it so many times and it's so great, but I was chasing around my 2 daughters this weekend and listening to Sigma Oasis, actually. I was listening to that quite a bit. Listening to that, listening to a new record we're going to talk about a bit later. But I kind of know the Island Tour like the back of my hand, so it feels like the old friend you can kind of go back to anytime, sit down at the bar, have a pint, you can pull it out when you need to. I was pretty close to listening to the April 5th Cavern today just because there's never a good reason not to listen to the April 5th Cavern. But if I'm being honest, I didn't pull it out.
I find myself only
okay.
I find myself only listening to the Island Tour now when we get to the anniversary, because I'm the same as you. I feel like I know it like the back of my hand. There's other Phish shows that I want to dig into at this point in time. Other years, other genres of the band. I think it's the most fascinating run the band's ever been on. As you guys may know, we released an episode back 2 years ago, as of right now, on the Nassau Piper, which is my favorite jam of the entire run. And I think the most interesting bit of music that they made throughout those 4 shows. But yeah, it was fun it's always fun to listen to that. The twist is great as well. There's so much in there. You mentioned Sigma Oasis, that you've been listening to this a lot. I don't think that we're covering this in an upcoming episode, so I think this would be a good time to give a little bit of our overall thoughts on the record, as it was a big deal when the band announced it, as well as when they live streamed this on Wednesday night. What are your thoughts on it kind of a weekend?
I think it's the best album since Story of the Ghost. I don't even think it's up for debate.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on it. I went in with tempered expectations, and those expectations were completely blown to smithereens. I am, quite frankly, shocked how much I love this album.
Yeah, there's still something else I would love to have Phish do with a record, and that's to go in and, completely experiment within a recording session and use the studio in the same way that they use a live venue. And that's something I think I hear as close as possible here on this record to anything that we've listened to thus far from Phish on record. And that in and of itself is a huge win. I also think the songwriting lines up together better than any album than probably Billy Breathes, in the sense that it doesn't just feel like a collection of new songs. It feels like a very thematic, pieced together record.
Yeah, it does have a sweet feel to it. On paper, you could look at it and think, all right, there's a lot of ballads.
Right.
And it does have a lot of ballads, but the way in which they're produced and the way in which they're sequenced and the care that's taken, it doesn't matter.
And everything's right and thread. I mean, 2 jams on an album, it's a really exciting thing.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to I've been taking a lot of long drives in my spare time, which is very limited right now, but I've been taking a lot of long drives out to the prairie and up into the mountains. And I'm just looking forward to that one afternoon, like Saturday drive where I have the windows down and I just blast Sigma Oasis, the title track, into it all.
Yeah, it's no, certainly the producer Vance Powell, he did Ghost of the Forest, so that album sounded really good. I think when that record came out, we said, wow, Phish should hire the same dude to make the next record because he knows how Trey and Phish should sound. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened. It's produced. I mean, it doesn't sound, it's lively sounding. It sounds like it was fun to make. It sounds like they were in the same room. And definitely while there is production. It's very dynamic. It's not flat. There's the string sections, but they're tasteful for the most part.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary in some of the strings used in Life Beyond the Dream. I think it's perfectly fine and good because that's one of Trey's better, Broadway showstopper ballads. Clearly, he's in love with that song. So it's, I think it's great. I think I've probably already listened to Sigma Oasis more than I listened to Big Boat, which is something else.
1,000% true for me because I did not like Big Boat from the gates, and it never lingered for me.
I think I liked it when it came out, and then I kind of thought, no.
That was an example of just thrown together tracks that didn't seem to fit in any sort of way. Production that sounded pretty flat to me, and
No Man's is really good. I think
No Man's is well done. I think I always wanted it this way as well done. I actually really like Running Out of Time. My only complaint with Sigma Oasis, I think the production on Shade is really overblown. Takes away a bit of the smallness that I really like about the story within Shade.
Right.
I would love to hear a stripped down version a la Running Out of Time, because I just think Shade is a really powerful song in a very small way. It's almost like Marriage Story in song by Fish. It's these like this couple that like has been together for so long, know each other inside and out in a lot of ways. And
less violent than Marriage Story.
Well, that's violent, yeah. But you know what I mean? Like that movie is just like a lot of like tiny events in someone's life that are like on a massive scale for that person.
Yeah.
This is kind of like that, but I would love to hear like a stripped down version. That's my only issue. It's the only part of the album where I'm kind of like, okay, I wish that either there was a different song here or there was a different touch here, but everything else flows perfectly for me.
I would have loved to see if they could put Set Your Soul Free on there. I thought that would have been good in like slot number 2, just move everything up one slot.
But then on the Japanese release, whenever that comes
exactly.
Out, where like they put like one extra song on.
One extra bonus track, the Japanese remix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they don't think so, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's Sigma Oasis is something to be applauded. It's really, 100%. It's extremely good. It's almost like they're in the dark in the sense that In the Dark had a lot of songs that the Dead had been playing it for a few years at that time. To the point people were kind of confused. Like it came out in 87. They've been playing Throwing Stones in 82, Touch of Grey, 82, Hell in a Bucket, 83. But then when they were all on the same album, bright, well-produced, radio-friendly, everyone loved it. That's one of like the best Dead studio records. So
yeah, I think it's a good sign of where the band is going forward. I really thought Kasvot Voxed was a very good thematic piece, and obviously they didn't sit in a recording studio and record that, but it felt like the first proper, really strong Fish album to me since Round Room. And I will always think of those Kasvot Vox songs as an album in and of themselves, even though technically it's, I get where someone could say it's not an album, but but Sigma Oasis seems to take everything I loved about Kasvot Vox, everything I loved about their approach to Wingsuit, even if I didn't totally love the final cut of Fuego, and it shows the band developing in a totally new area that for a long time was, if not a weakness, just not their strong suit. And I hope that that's a sign of things to come, because I think hearing the band in the studio playing really quality music could be just another avenue of creativity and also success for them.
And I also appreciate the fact that Rise Come Together is not on there.
Yes. Yes.
I was scared.
So we have one additional topic before we jump into the top fives. We kind of went on a tangent there with Sigma Oasis, but clearly we have thoughts. Brief little background as we were compiling these top fives. So we polled many of you out there, our lovely Twitter followers, what you would like to hear us rank from a top five standpoint. We picked, I think, 7 or 8 of these. And we were on board with, I would say, 7 of them. I had to convince Dave of a category, and one category I had to nix, which was his, which was
top 5 breakfast cereals.
And the reason why I nixed it is and this may be a very controversial opinion here. I have no opinion on breakfast cereal. It's functionality completely. I have no real preference for what I want. I mean, maybe I'll eat some Wheaties or some Frosted Flakes. I don't know. Like to me, it's simply fuel if I either don't have time or am starving and need a quick breakfast and it's the only option available. Um, so I have no opinion, but Dave, I want to hear, did you come up with a top 5 list of cereal, or is it something you have stored in your brain?
First of all, that's pretty fucked up. I haven't gone 2 days of my life without having breakfast cereal or breakfast cereal for dinner. Just call it cereal. I have no issues sitting down with a bowl of cereal for dessert and being very, very happy with it. But oh boy, top 5 off the top of my head, maybe no uncertain order. Certainly honey bunches of oats with almonds. That's just like an absolutely delicious. Nut clusters, almonds, flakes gives me the energy and just the right level of sweetness to start the day. So goddamn good. Guess you gotta put Lucky Charms in there for the novelty factor. There holds a soft spot because that was always my vacation cereal. As
Okay.
my family would go to Cape Cod, we kind of go crazy and let me bring like a box of Lucky Charms. So certainly gotta put Honey Nut Cheerios in the top 5. Regular Cheerios is very good. Honey Nut gives you that little bit of extra. That's like, Trey plays Tweez the Reprise. He's like, fuck it, let's play the second time. That's your Honey Nut Cheerios. Let's see. Getting towards the top. Certainly Frosted Mini Wheats. A little sugary. Big fan in high school. But I think the ultimate breakfast cereal in my mind will be and will always be Crackling Oat Bran, because that's basically like eating incredibly delicious oatmeal cookies for breakfast under the guise of health.
It's a fiber.
Yeah, it's fibrous. Really nothing healthy about it. It's so delicious. You will sip the milk. For some reason, my parents always have a box of waiting for me when I go visit them. Kind of missing it now. So that's my cereal list. In case you're wondering.
I appreciate that you rattled that off your head. I can assure all of you viewers that there is there are no notes on that. There was no prep involved there. That was all Dave's brain. So I appreciate your passion for cereal, even if I don't share it. So jumping into the formal portion of the episode, I will note that we're going to each share a new album recommendation at the end of this whole countdown. Whatever we're doing here, going through a bunch of random lists that I had some fun making over the weekend. Dave, what are some of our big themes here?
Top five. Did I listen to pop music because I was miserable? Or was I miserable because I listened to pop music? New albums, new music, and new records. So let's get it started.
All right. So top 5 lists here. We polled everyone who follows BTP. We got some really great, funny responses here. Some lists that we were like, man, that is a lot of thought for us to come up with this. I'm looking at you, Ben Greenfield. Some other lists. I think he wanted to know which artists we would like to be quarantined with if they couldn't play their music, which I really liked that episode, or that idea. But I was like, which artists do I listen to that I just could care less about their music, but them as a person is what I want. And I kind of stopped at 3. The first list that we're going to go through here, I love this list. I think it's a really good one to kick things off. The top 5 holy shit album moments. This came to us from one of our good friends, Mike Lawn Memo Mimeo. Can be found on Twitter at Lawn Memo. His addendum to this was essentially 5 best moments where you're listening to a record and you were like, holy shit, this either taught me something about music or made this one of like the best records I'm ever going to listen to. Dave, what are your 5 holy shit album moments?
Okay, number 5, Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. Heard it when I was 15 years old. The song Son of Mr. Green Jeans, the 3rd song on the record. Got to be purely improvised. I listened to it. I said, oh, this is where Tweezer jams come from. Okay, sure really like Frank Zappa. And that Hot Rats is one of my favorite records. And that album, you can definitely trace a line. Trey's obviously heard that many times. Number 4, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Free for All. I said, how can jazz be this intense? How can there be such propulsion, such drummer? Listen to that Curtis Fuller trombone solo. This is inspiring. My God. Number 3, Fish's Cavern, Picture Nectar version. Listen to it kind of for the 3rd or 4th time on an airplane going back from Breckenridge with my family on a ski trip. Once Cavern kicked in, everything was like the bolt of lightning came down and said, this is where it's at for me. I was squirming in my seat. That was it. Fish was it. Number 2, Wilco. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. Interesting. I picked Jesus, etc. because I kind of always thought of Yankee Hotel Foxtrot as a piece of literature like Moby Dick or Charles Dickens' Bleak House that you appreciate but don't actually love. And then I saw them do it live in Central Park with Sonic Youth and during Jesus, etc. The whole thing just clicked. No, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot's a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah.
And number 1, I have Miles Davis, In a Silent Way. I think I related this story way back in episode 2 of Beyond the Pond.
Yep.
I was in my friend's dorm room. I was extremely stoned. He put this on for the first time. And in the second movement, in Chick Corea's Fender Rhodes, it sounds like it's descending. I looked up. I saw asbestos patches on the ceiling look like clouds. Like the clouds are coming down on my head as the Fender Rhodes. And I thought, this is the greatest album of all time. And it is one of the greatest albums of all time. So, all right.
I love it. I love that list. And yeah, the In a Silent Way, I remember talking about that in episode 2. And that was a huge moment of discovery and insight for me. I was not as familiar with that era of Miles Davis and just blew my brain. I was so glad we featured that early on. So my 5 holy shit album moments. So when I was 12 years old, I went to a sleepover. We listened to Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd. It was kind of the perfect age to listen to that song. The Wall is not the album though, because I went home the next morning and I told my dad about it. And my dad was like, that's awesome. That's not the album you should listen to. Let's go to the record store right now. And he bought me Dark Side of the Moon. Which obviously, from a 20-year somewhat on phase, like there's a bit of, it's kind of the expected answer, but it's a very profound moment for a 12-year-old. I went home. His instructions were very deliberate. Turn out the lights. Don't come out of the room until the record's over.
Smoke this pot.
Everything but that. But it was a clear line to all of that. But anyway, I put the record on, the screams, and then drops into Breathe. And I remember realizing as I'm listening to the record that like there's no breaking point in this record. It segues all together. And this is what an album could be. So that's my number 5. Number 4, Yo La Tengo, and then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out. This is a band that pretty much everybody in my life told me I should listen to. And I finally did via this record. Completely shattered my expectations of indie rock, completely showed me that ambient music and rock could sit side by side, and is still my favorite record from that band. Number 3, Radiohead, OK Computer, specifically side B. Side 1 is a blitz of singles. Every song is incredible, but pretty much every song on side A is a single. It opens up with Airbag, Paranoid Android, Letdown, Karma Police. Like all these songs were on the radio at some point, especially Android and Karma Police. And then you get past Fitter Happier and you realize side B is just as good, if not in some ways better. And you got like The Tourist, you got No Surprises, you got Climbing Up Walls. I mean, Electioneering, like there's so many songs on that second side that I sometimes like I get to Fitter Happier. I remember just being like, okay, does the album end shortly after this? Like it felt like so much leading up to there. And then it's this just raises up for the last. Number 2, the Beatles, Revolver into Sgt. Pepper's by Way of Tomorrow Never Knows. That song, the way it bridges these 2 eras of the Beatles. Revolver is my favorite Beatles record. But there's a lot of properness on that record, even within a ton of experimentation. And you segue into Sgt. Pepper's by Way of Tomorrow Never Knows. It just blows my mind all the time, every time I hear it. And number one, I was born in the mid 80s. I was listening to music pretty regularly by the time the 90s started because it was always on my parents' house, specifically listening to a lot of U2. And I loved the Joshua Tree. I loved Rattle and Hum. I went and saw Rattle and Hum in the theaters. And Octune Baby comes out in 91. Zoo Station starts. And it's just this realization of total reinvention is completely possible within classic rock, big rock bands. And it was an amazing moment.
I hope I have an opportunity to like dad-splain like Jim Brinkman did way back with Pink Floyd.
I do too.
Maybe my daughter will go buy a Pearl Jam record. It's not 10. Be like, no.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So our next segment here, top 5 sporting events we didn't attend. I loved this. It's got me thinking from a sports mindset. This came to us from Michael Birdie. Thank you so much for suggesting this. Dave, what are your 5 sporting events you wish you had attended?
My number 5 is the 2004 Masters. I love golf. I play it. I grew up with watching it with my dad. You'd always turn on golf, have a beer, and fall asleep on the couch. It's like the ultimate Sunday relaxation. 2004 Masters was when Phil Mickelson won his first major. He was 33 years old. At that point, even still, he was very good, extremely wealthy. But I guess he won. I think he shot 9 under, beat Ernie Els at 1 stroke, who has an 8 under. And it was just first major. If you follow golf like I did, it was emotional. Kind of welled up a little bit. This is also at a time I was in between girlfriends for a few months in 2004. So I was very emotional and lonely at the same time when I was watching this. So that was my number 5. My number 4, February 10th, 2012. You may think, what's that? If you're from New York City and you follow basketball, you know what that is. Jeremy Lin put up 38 points against Kobe and the Lakers. Basically, Lin's sanity was the last time being a Knicks fan was any fun. And given that it was so incredibly fun, that was probably the best 2.5 weeks of my life at one point. It was every night. I couldn't wait to watch, see what he would do next. And then basically Carmelo pushed him out because Carmelo's a jerk. And everything James Dolan touches turns to shit at some point. So, but we'll always have insanity. Number 3, Super Bowl 42. I'm a New York Giants fan. That was when David beat Goliath, 17-14. Eli Manning took down Tom Brady. You don't have to be a Giants fan to like seeing Tom Brady get his ass beat, because that's just like American watching Tom Brady get beat. I watched that on TV with some buddies, had some beers, had some wings. During the David Tyree helmet catch, I fell on the floor and kind of injured myself, thinking what the hell just happened? Number 2, July 22nd, 1986, Mets versus Cincinnati Reds. 14 innings, 5-hour game. If you Google the name Ray Knight, I think the third thing that comes up is Ray Knight, Eric Davis fight. So this is maybe my favorite playoff baseball game of all time. This is when in 1986, I think there was 2 outs. In the 9th inning, there was a pop-up. Then Reds all-star outfielder Dave Parker has a clank off the side of his glove. Then 2 runs scored, and the game gets tied at 3-3. So the game should have been over. Wasn't over. So this was a game in which the Mets kind of ran out of position players because Reds all-star, I think third baseman Eric Davis, slid kind of hard into Ray Knight. Ray Knight used to be a Gold Gloves boxer. So he slugged him, and it was a huge bench-clearing brawl. And as a result, a lot of people got ejected from the games. Mets manager Davey Johnson had to use his relief pitchers in the outfield. So you had Jesse Roscoe, left-handed closer, playing left field, and Roger McDowell on the mound. And you would actually switch them between innings. The left closer and the right-handed closer would switch back and forth in the outfield and the mound. So
wild.
Yeah, a lot of twists and turns. Crazy game. I remember it well because I was 6 years old, so I went to bed, I think in the 7th inning. Woke up the next day, asked my dad what happened. He's like, son, you're not going to believe it.
I feel like there were a lot of mid-'80s baseball games like that just went on extra innings, high-scoring, intense games. lots of back and forth. I know that there's the Ryan Sandberg game is when the
Mm.
Cubs and Cardinals, and I think it was 84, just went back and forth across into extra innings. I think the score ended up being like 11-9. Rhino hit like a grand slam earlier in the game, but then won the game on a home run, and
There you go.
just wild stuff.
And then my number one, Game 7 of the 86 World Series. I was not there. My father was there with my grandfather. You can see them. They had 7 rows behind the Mets dugout. You can see them get toilet paper dumped onto their head because that was something that they did in baseball games in the 80s. I'll never understand. That's my top 5 sporting events I did not attend.
All right. So mine, I would say 3 are pretty predictable if you know who I am. 2 are kind of like, what the hell? And I'll explain. So my number 5 is the 2015 NLDS Game 4. 2015 Cubs are one of my favorite teams in the history of all sports. They ended up getting swept by the hated Mets. Nation was rooting against the Mets, Dave. I promise you. They got swept by the Mets in the playoffs.
They got swept by Daniel Murphy's what happened.
That's true. That's true. But 2015 NLDS, we beat the Cardinals 3-1, and games 3 and 4 were in Chicago, and there was so much joy, there was so much energy. We were beating the Cardinals, we were winning at home. We had this team that could clearly contend for a World Series that year, and won it the following year. There was so much hope, so much joy. I'd forgotten what it was like to root for a winning baseball team, and it was one of the best moments of my life. It was like a month after my son was born, so he was watching the game with us. Obviously, it's a really cool moment.
Would you say it was the life beyond the dream?
A little bit later for that. Number 4 for me, the 93 AFC wildcard game between the Buffalo Bills and the Houston Oilers. Like many kids in the early 90s who were home for Christmas break, watching the wild card round before going back to school was a really fun moment, kind of hanging on to all the joy of Christmas break. And I remember watching this game with my dad on our couch in our old living room. The Bills were down by like 30 plus points at half, came back, won the game. Frank Reich, I think, took over from Jim Kelly, and it was just a wild back and forth, crazy football game. I just remember watching it with my dad the whole time, and great memories with him. The type of stuff that just like harnesses you as a sport fan. Number 3 for me, the 2003 ALCS Game 7. I watched this from my dorm room in college with some of my best friends. We had ingested some stuff that took us to a different place, and we watched this baseball game because we really enjoyed doing both of those things in the fall of 2003. And it turned out to be like this insane, intense baseball game. Looked like the Red Sox were going to win in Yankee Stadium, and then the Yankees stormed this crazy comeback and walk it off with Aaron Boone. It was just like the most intense baseball game and experience with all these guys who are now my best friends, throughout my life, in this tiny little dorm room. At one point, one of my friends who's a duck hunter brought out a duck and like was passing it around the room and freaking people out, like in the middle of the game when like the noise from Yankee Stadium was happening and stuff. It was intense.
Taxidermy?
No, like one that he had shot that weekend. He was like waiting to skin and everything. It was a weird night, man. Number 2, the 92 NBA Finals Game 6. This is my favorite basketball game of all time. The Bulls won their second title at home. They were down 15 going into the 4th. They win the title. Jordan was on the bench for the majority of the comeback. They win the title, and the entire crowd storms the court. John Paxson threw the ball up in the air and seemingly never came down. Watching that game with my family, my sister was an infant. My dad and I were yelling so loudly at the TV when the Bulls were going down that my mom took my brother and sister upstairs and watched the game with them. We watched it downstairs. where we could yell and get angry. And then we rejoined as a family when the Bulls came back together. And number one, this is pretty simple. 2016 World Series Game 7. Best sports moment of my entire life.
Almost the best sports moment of Rajai Davis's entire life. Didn't quite work out for him.
Didn't quite work out for him.
No.
So
good guy. Everyone loves Rajai Davis.
Yeah, really good dude.
So.
Took it off of a really shitty dude, so it worked. All right. So moving forward here.
One quick story.
Okay.
2003 ALCS Game 7. I watched that game with, I think, 5 Mets fans and 1 hardcore Boston Red Sox fan. So the Mets fans were enjoying the game and were rooting for the Red Sox, but we were drunk and ultimately didn't have much skin in the game because we weren't like Red Sox fans. So my buddy Steve, it was his apartment, and he's just like laughing the whole time. He's drunk. He may be on, I think he also was on mushrooms at the time. He, when Aaron Boone came up against Tim Wakefield, he's saying, watch, he's going to hit a home run. This is it. This is the end of the game. Just watch. And that's what happened. So then my friend Joel, who was the big Red Sox fan, he stood up, turned to Steve and said, "Look what you fucking did, asshole." And he stormed out of the apartment and slammed the door. So I get it.
I get it.
Sports fandom, I get it, you know?
Yeah, I hear you.
So
all right, so next segment we got here is the top 5 Fish studio tracks. This is good and very much of the time, with Stigma Oasis being a fantastic record that just came out. This came to us from at Two-Faced John McSee. I think also goes by Westfall. Who's been following us and interacting with us for a while. What's up, man? Thank you so much for this. Dave, what do you got?
Top 5 Fish studio tracks. Number 5, a little bit of a sentimental pick, Cavern on Picture Nectar. That's the one which I got it, but also it sounds really good. The drums have that really good, like, cavernous echo, the boom, and then Mike's bass is really popping and funky, and the organ comes in, and Trey's doesn't really sound like Trey, kind of does, but I mean, they kind of play it much more laid back in the studio, whereas the first time I heard it live, it was obviously played much faster, much more breakneck speed. I just thought it was a really well executed, radio friendly song that could have been a hit. So that's my number 5. Number 4, Everything's Right, our Sigma Oasis, going like type 2 jamming in the studio. I mean, not only is it a very good studio track, that could be legitimately like a top 10 version of like Everything's Right. It's just so well done. It sounds so good. I'm listening to it. I don't even realize I'm listening to like a studio album anymore. It's just that I had zero expectations of that ever happening.
Right.
So that's great.
I penciled that song in as like, it's going to have horn outro, very different from the live version. It's going to be kind of a peppy outro. And the way that they took it in the direction of some of the better live versions, but then kind of distorted that and didn't give us the full peak that we're used to on a lot of versions, I thought was really, really interesting and really good use of studio space.
Absolutely. I've got my number 3, Farmhouse, Dirt, Sparkles, studio version, layered, crisp, sparkly, the little curly cues. It's just like a fantastically produced version of the song.
Yeah.
Bryce Goggin knows how to produce records. He produced some of the best Pavement albums. Number 2 studio track, David Bowie, full-on Bowie jam in the studio. When I was 14 years old, that blew my mind that you could do that on like a record. I remember I caught myself staring at the stereo thinking, what is happening? Number 1 best Fish studio track has to be If I Could. 3rd song on Hoist. It's just gorgeous. Alison Krauss's vocals are gorgeous. The string section is perfect. It is just an absolutely beautifully constructed song. But I think the reason they play it so seldom is that they got it so right in the studio that they just have a hard time doing it justice.
Right. You've got
Alison
some really
Krauss
good live
strings.
versions, but it's
Yeah.
really hard to match the perfection with Alison Krauss and how that all came together. I mean, I love that song. I love hearing it live, but yeah, excellent version.
It's Paul Fox knows how to make records.
Right.
Produced XTC Oranges and Lemons, John Henry, They Might Be Giants. I think 10,000 Maniacs, big record. But yeah. Okay. What do you got?
So my top 5 starts with number 5, Thread. I've always loved this song since it debuted. I wish they would play it more. I think it's got a huge jam potential. You get this just very demented, my friend, 20 years on Fish tune that gets an outstanding slot. Thematically, it closes out the record in a really fantastic way. It really just feels like a cap to the entire record. The argument can be made that there should be something positive at the end. I'm personally a sucker for them doing that type of dark and twisted approach to an album. The production's great, as is the entirety of Sigma Oasis. And then the jam, it's fucking dark, just dank, exploratory Fish jam that I would kill to hear in a live setting. Number 4, Fuego, Waiting All Night. This kind of ties into what I was talking about with Yola Tango's and then Nothing Turns Itself Inside Out. This very blissy indie rock Fish take. The song itself, I'd love to hear more. The overall placement of it in a lot of its larger slots, I'm thinking immediately of 8-1-15, have been so great. But the recorded version, I remember when the video came out, it's like that gray landscape with just like the pink sludge coming down the river trails. I just loved that, and it just fit that song perfectly. I loved how they opened Fall Tour 2014 with it. Just great track, great song, really well done. In a similar sense, my number 3 pick is Waves off of Round Room. This is a very Deady Fish take. This was one of the moments that helped me to understand what the Dead were going for. I think it's the closest Fish has come to sounding like mid 70s, late 70s, or sorry, kind of early 72 to 76 Dead, where it could get spacey in a kind of looser way. I love this song. So many great live versions as well. Really good cap to the Round Room record, and a great kind of intro into what 2.0 was going to be about. Number 2, similar to your Bowie pick, I've got Divided Sky off Junta. This is perfect studio Fish. The acoustic intro into a note for note perfection build on Divided Sky. This was one of the early selling points for me. This is still my favorite Fish song, and still a performance that when I listen back to this, I can just hear that richness in what early Fish was, that curiosity, that ambition, the color that was in everything that, really kind of was part of their lack of national appeal. There's such an earnestness to what they do, and that's really captured in the overall melody and build that I hear in Divided Sky. But my number 1 pick goes hand in hand with kind of what I've been saying here all along from a Sigma Oasis standpoint. My favorite officially released Fish album is the Sick It disc, followed closely by Round Room, and I would say Sigma Oasis after that. Story of the Ghost and Rift right in there. Bailey Breathes also a great one, but the Sick It disc showcases what happens when you take live Fish and you meld it with studio Fish. Experimentation gets a little bit weirder. Obviously they go out there in a lot of live jams, but having them just in a studio with no audience, nobody paying the opportunity to just like play something and then tinker with it, you get that really well with My Left Toe. And that's a song I'd love to see Fish bring back. And as my number 1 Fish track at Fish studio cut, I think it's a perfect encapsulation of the band in the studio. So next segment here, next top 5. This comes to us again from Two-Faced John MC. Really, really good stuff here, man. I had a ton of fun with this. I watched a lot of these episodes last night because I wanted to make my list. I've actually been watching a lot of this. It's top 5 Simpsons episodes. Dave, what do you got?
I'll preface this by saying I went from watching The Simpsons every Sunday without fail And about 2002, I realized it was getting fucking dire, so I stopped. And the fact that The Simpsons is still on the air is one of the biggest crimes of American nature. So, used to be incredible. Now it's just a pale shadow of what it once was. But my favorite Simpsons episodes, number 5, the Itchy, Scratchy, and Poochie Show. Of course, being the episode where Itchy and Scratchy adds Poochie, the rockin' dog. And that brings you many, now whenever someone says worst episode ever, or like Poochie died going back to his home planet, that's often in the lexicon. Poochie has kind of been used to establish when a show has jumped the shark and they try to bring it back in some fashion, kind of like when the Cosby Show kept adding like little young kids to keep it going. Poochie was that. So anyway, number 5. And number 4, earlier episode, Flamin' Moe's. This was an episode where Homer invented the Flamin' Homer, which got co-opted by Moe's, the Flamin' Moe. It was the episode that had Aerosmith in it, which I thought was pretty great when I was like 11 years old. Just a classic. I could watch that episode all the time. Number 3 was be Homer's Phobia, which was the episode with John Waters, where he becomes friends with John Waters' character, who turns out to be gay, and Homer turns out to be a bit of a jerk. It's a lesson episode, also extremely, extremely funny episode. Number 2, I've got King Size Homer, the episode where Homer gains over 300 pounds to go on disability. I'm laughing now just thinking about it. That's the best part of that is when he goes into a store for Big and Tall, and I guess like the salesperson says, "Sir, we kind of cater to people who find regular clothes confining. So we sell muumuus and judicial robes and capes." And he's like, "Ugh, I don't want to be a weirdo. I'll just buy a muumuu."
It fits him though, man.
He's got the Batman hat.
Yeah, it fits him, dude.
Okay, number 1 favorite Simpsons episode of all time is Homer the Great, aka the Stonecutters. Because who held back the electric car? Who made Steve Gutenberg a star? We do. We do. Love the Stonecutters episode, especially because the head Stonecutter is voiced by Patrick Stewart, full on like Jean-Luc Picard mode. So it's an impossible task, though. I mean, there's so many incredible episodes. I mean, the top 5 is useless. I could have another top 5 tomorrow, but yeah.
So my 5 kicks off with Lemon of Troy. This is kind of a classic widening of the world episode. I always love it when the Simpsons do this, where they take you outside of Springfield and kind of into the larger world, and the weirdness that happens with that. Yeah, it's just a great look at the overall town itself. It's a really funny episode. Number 4, Cape Fear. I think there's a lot of people that consider this to be the best Simpsons episode, at least kind of unanimous top 10, top 5 Simpsons episode.
Top 20.
This is the perfect Sideshow Bob episode. Tracks the family down. This has one of my favorite Simpsons moments where they're about to go into witness protection, and the FBI agents are saying to Homer, when I step on your foot and say, "Hello, Mr. Thompson," you say yes. And they've been doing this for like 8 hours now. There's like smoke in the room. They've got like a bunch of empty coffee mugs, and he steps on Homer's foot and says, "Hello, Mr. Thompson." And Homer turns around and goes, "I think he's talking to you." Yeah, agent over his shoulder. Just everything I love about Homer in that moment. Number 3, this is a newer episode. I will contend with you that there are great episodes this decade. They're lost within it. You have to really dig, but there's some fantastic 2010 Simpsons episodes where they kind of got past the movie that was really good, and they started with the creativity again.
I never saw this episode, so I got to seek it out. Anyway.
This one, totally fun thing Bart will never do again. This is a David Foster Wallace inspired look at life, where the Simpsons take a cruise, and Bart realizes about halfway through the cruise that it's going to end at some point. He's going to have to go back to his meaningless life where there's no joy and there's constant boredom with like intermittent moments of beauty and happiness and connectivity, but those moments only showcase to you how boring and meaningless the rest of life is. It's just like spiral. So Bart comes up with a plan to keep everyone on the cruise ship. He takes a Treat Williams straight to video movie called Pandemic and plays it over the ship, convincing everyone that there's a pandemic on land and that we have to stay on the boat, which was another layer to it as I was rewatching it this weekend, where I was like, wow, this hits a lot closer to home right now than it would have when I first saw it. Number 2, a very classic episode, Marge versus the Monorail. One of the best grifter shout outs ever. You just take down Conan O'Brien's voice on that episode is fantastic. Just hysterical across the board. And I think it's one of their best comments on power and politics in a lot of ways.
What's that word? Monorail. Say it again. Monorail.
Number 1 for me is I would say kind of similar to you with Stonecutters, but also King Size Homer. It's The Boy Who Knew Too Much. This just never fails to make me laugh like crazy. Bart escapes from school and gets caught up with the Quimby kids. Showder is a
Showder.
hilarious moment in this episode. Chowder. So yeah, I'm the same way though. I could probably sit back. I was going through a bunch of episodes this weekend, and I was like, "There's a lot I could just go for here."
Yeah.
All right, jumping back into music. We've got our next category here. Again, Two-Face, John McSee. Great stuff here. I love this section. This was a ton of fun to come up with. I guess every one of these was, but top 5 Fish one-timers. So top 5 songs that Fish played once and presumably will not play again. Dave, what do you got?
Number 5, End of Session. I didn't realize that was like a song. I thought that was just a really cool bit of inspiration at the end of the story that goes, that was never going to get played live. So when they actually played it at the Jam-Filled show, which Fish is playing on Tuesday night, dinner and a movie, looking forward to that. When they played it at Jam-Filled, and I was at that show and saw them do End of Session, part of me said, that's amazing. What the fuck? That was a song when I was in college. I often put on the last 20 minutes of story that goes to fall asleep. So that was like the last thing I heard before conking off. So it was really cool that it was something that they could actually play, thought about playing, and knew how to play. So number 4, another Baker's Dozen from Boston Cream Night, Sunshine of Your Feeling. Great mashup, great joke, really good song. I mean, I would have liked to see that enter the rotation. I cannot for the life of me believe that they didn't play it at Fenway Park, just because that would have been easy and awesome, and it would have helped redeem Night to a Fenway, which not good. Number 3, Oasis' Champagne Supernova. Not because it was played fine, but just because it's part of the Harpoon story, where Tom Marshall comes out and sings it, and that's what I think Trey referred to as the Uber Demon singing the sounds of hell. Which, yeah, Champagne Supernova was really, really, really overplayed in 1996. But it's a great song. The second Oasis album is awesome. I'll ride for that album any day of the week. So it was kind of fun. This thing, Fish had their finger on the pulse and have a good sense of humor. Number 2, Smashing Pumpkins' Rhinoceros, which opened the Deer Creek August 3rd, 98 show we always talk about. Just a great version of a song from a band that doesn't sound anything like Fish. And Fish had no business sounding like the Smashing Pumpkins.
Right.
But it was just great. Like, they nailed the guitar solo, the drum beat, the crescendos. I mean, a lot of the covers Fish played in summer 1998 sounded like Fish trying to cover another band, whereas this time they actually found a way to sound like the Smashing Pumpkins. So, and then my number 1, August 9th, 1998, Terrapin Station Encore. Kind of a safe pick, but just gorgeous and unexpected, and they're not going to play that again. So, but it was perfect in the moment.
It's kind of the unanimous number 1, I would say, especially for Fish fans who have a big affinity for the Dead. Even if you don't, knowing where the
There's
band
fish
came
fans
from.
There's fish fans don't have a big affinity for the Dead. Oh,
I don't
yes,
know.
there
I'm
are.
I'm just assuming. I wasn't really a big Dead fan until a couple of years ago, and then I really got it and kept going. But I even know, like for myself, as someone who wasn't really big into them, how important they were for the band for Fish. And I remember hearing Terrapin Station for the first time. It just that swell when everybody realizes what's happening is uncanny and one of the best moments of their overall career. So
All right.
my top five. Number five, You Ain't Going Nowhere. I mean, if you're gonna give me Basement Tapes era Dylan, played by Fish in 2.0 when Fish was considering covering the Basement Tapes for Halloween, at least Trey said so, and I think Rolling Stone that summer. Really fits the shagginess of their sound and kind of the woodsiness of their sound. And then they're teasing it right before it. Just perfect stuff. Number four, Tomorrow's Song on 11/27/09. I think this is a song that could probably get played again, but I think this is a heavily underrated moment. Piper rages in this set. And this show, I actually prefer to 11/28/09. I think it's just a better overall show. You've got a kind of weird light closing out set one, the debut of Golden Age, and then they played a ton of recital second sets in 2009 and 2010, and sometimes they nailed them, and the flow was great, and it worked like an album in some ways. And this was one of those sets where I thought that happened, and I really liked how Piper jammed really hard, and then moved into this very calypso, blissful period before dropping into a Tomorrow's Song that I never thought I'd hear, kind of similar to you with End of Session.
Right.
Number three, Rock and Roll Part 2, kicking off Hampton Comes Alive. So this is one of the first Fish tracks I ever heard, and I thought it was so fucking cool that the song that I associated fully with the Chicago Bulls winning NBA championships. They would always like pump this in the stadium when they were winning or when they won the title. Or as like you were coming back into commercial sometimes, just to like get the crowd going. Hearing Fish play this, I was like, this band is hysterical. They're awesome. And I need to listen to more of them.
You know, there's actually like a video for that song. Like there's like a Gary Glitter video.
I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. It's not spectacular, but it's very real.
Number two for me, Tuesday's Gone from 7/13/1999. This is a really fantastic encore that the song fits them perfectly and fits the late 90s late night debauchery feel of the overall era. And they really did a good job with this performance, and closes out one of my favorite shows from that whole year.
Scott Morosky was doing that.
Scott Morosky with them. It's a really cool moment for like the future of the band as well.
And it
kind
was
of
a Tuesday.
Projects.
I was there.
A Tuesday night.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite shows overall. And yeah, I love that. Number one, Powder Night. My opinion of the best Baker's Dozen show. My favorite Neil Young song, Powderfinger. Trey nails this. The band nails this. Coming out of the 1-2 punch of jam filled into Powder. You're 5 shows into the Baker's Dozen at that point in time. You know that what you're getting is absolute epicness going forward. And that song was emotional. Also, just a really exciting cover. It fit the band really well and sent everyone to the next phase of the Baker's Dozen, the second weekend, the weekend I was at, in a really profound and fantastic way.
Yeah, sometimes the obvious choice is the best choice. I was at Powder Night with my buddy, friend of the pod, PJ Rudolph. We just turned to each other and said, like, they should play Powderfinger for the encore. It's obvious, but it'd be amazing. That's what they did. And it was obvious and amazing. God, that was good. That was good. So next, this is a fun one. Top 5 characters from HBO shows. This comes from at Fish100 blog. So we'll bite.
Yeah, we're both connoisseurs of the HBO television shows that have been pumped out for the last 20 years and have been fantastic.
So let's see. My number 5 characters from HBO shows is Crazy Eyes Killer, course, from the Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Crazy Eyes Killer was the gangster rapper who Larry David befriends at a party. And I think that episode is probably the funniest half hour of television the past 20 years. So my favorite part is when he gives Larry the tour of his house. He says, "This is the floor. It's made with that, that floor shit." Number 4, HBO characters. Tyrion Lannister, Game of Thrones. Peter Dinklage, incredible character.
Unbelievable character.
Unbelievable character. Just
always had the best things to say. Greatest monologues throughout the series.
Greatest monologues, best one-liners. Saying his job is, what's he say? I drink and I know things.
Yeah.
Sums it up. Number 3, Tony Soprano from The Sopranos, groundbreaking television show that started the golden age of television. James Gandolfini. It's very sad that he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
It's just HBO's got a lot of great anti-heroes, and Tony Soprano is absolutely an anti-hero. Speaking of anti-heroes, number 2, Al Swearengen from Deadwood, played
Good
by
call, man.
the British actor, maybe Scottish, I forget, Ian McShane. Just incredible character, very fond of saying the word cocksucker. Nobody says it like Al Swearengen says it. He just, it's an incredibly watchable show. You have to really focus on Deadwood. You got to let it marinate, but it's so rewarding. And then number 1, from The Wire, Omar Little. Of course, Michael K. Williams, West Baltimore's Robin Hood, just a legendary character. Whenever our 11-month-old scurries down the hall towards us, we always say, "Omar coming." So just I'll be a cliche. If you haven't seen The Wire, you got to see The Wire. A little bit dated, but still it's like universal truths top to bottom.
Yeah, it's a show you have to break through, I think, episodes 1 and 2, and it can feel a bit like a chore your first or second time around.
Yeah.
But once you get through, man, it's just the depth of characters, the storytelling, the larger perspectives on the world, and the comments on kind of current society is, I think there's some datiness. You're absolutely right. But I think also there's a lot of truths that stick in that show.
Season 4 is the greatest season of television in the history of television.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And David Simon, he just makes incredible TV, and he's very loyal to his actors. So you watch one David Simon, you see them keep popping up in like every David Simon show.
Right.
Like, anyway. Yeah.
So this is a good segue because my number 5 is a bit more of an obvious character from The Wire, but Stringer Bell. I'm a white kid from the suburbs. The idea of the world of The Wire was as far removed as like living in the middle of nowhere in China or something. You know, I don't know. Like it's not my lifestyle. That's not my life at all. And watching that show completely opened my eyes to what this larger world of inner city Black America was in a lot of cases, where there tended to be concentrated crime, drug abuse, poverty. And yet within that, there are these people that were trying to make their lives better, and seeing that, trying to make their community better, and seeing that through the eyes of Stringer Bell, who is kind of like an anti-hero in a sense of Tony Soprano, but also clearly trying to do work for his community, was just, it was unbelievable. I totally broke through for me in terms of what a completely different lifestyle, different world was from where I came from.
He wanted to run it like a business. That was ultimately his undoing.
Yeah, exactly. Number 4, Robert Baratheon, season 1 king. Dude, the guy had to die, but I wish he had stuck around. Him and Tyrion getting drunk as King's Landing was falling would be just a fantastic, like him in season 2, I feel like would have added some brightness to that overall dark season. He was great, and was one of the early catch points for me for Game of Thrones. Number 3, I had to go with the GOAT, Larry David. It's pretty much my persona distilled on screen. The man, I have a very close friend who half of our conversations end up devolving into curb digressions and curb analysis. And I just feel like Larry David was created for us. Number 2, Tony Soprano. Like you said, Dave, the greatest anti-hero ever, greatest lead actor ever. Sopranos is my favorite show I've ever seen. I think The Wire is objectively better, but I like The Sopranos more. And Tony Soprano just led that show perfectly. Number 1, however, the best sub character in TV history, man who colored season 2 in a way that it simply could have been, and is still my favorite character I've ever seen on HBO shows. That is Mr. Richie Aprile. The jacket. I fucking love that dude. He is nothing but evil, but the performance in the show is just it's otherworldly in some ways. And like trying to understand that man's ethical principles were just a mind-blowing moment while watching that show.
You pick Richie Aprile over Ralph Cifaretto?
I liked Richie way more than Ralphie. Ralphie, I was fine when he went.
Yeah, Ralphie's a psychopath. Richie is sleazy, but he's not
that old school and loyal.
Yeah, well, not quite the psycho that Ralph is.
Right.
Anyway, next one, we've got props. This is our top 5 album covers, also submitted by at Two-Faced John McC. Thank you once again. So I limited this one to album covers I own, just so I wouldn't break my brain thinking about it. So let's see. Number 5. Yola Tango, and then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out. It's a dark album that feels like a strange nighttime suburban landscape where like a UFO alien beams you up. It's just, I can't think of an album where the cover art so much reflects the contents inside. Number 4, this blew my mind in high school, still does, Rush's Hemispheres. Just look at it. It's so cool. It's like the brain, there's the guy, it's like butt. I always thought if I opened up like a brewery, I'd call it like some kind of reference to like Cygnus, because the gods of balance in brewing, and it would be like a spoof. This guy would be holding up like a pint glass, and this would be a hop over here. And I wouldn't get sued because Rush are funny guys. Number 3, favorite album cover of all time, Rolling Stones, Some Girls.
It's a really good one.
Number 3, Let's Go Modern. One of my favorite newer bands, fucking Garcia Peoples. One step behind. This is awesome.
Yeah. It says everything I want about the band. Like there's like the pixelated image in the back that I want to just like look into, the weird eye that's dripping out to you, super psychedelic. It's good stuff.
And number 1, probably my favorite album of all time, is my favorite cover of all time. Look at this. Neil Young, Tonight's Tonight. It's like he's telling you that tonight's tonight.
This is important.
This is important. Don't do heroin. It's not going to end good for you. So, all right. That's my top 5.
So I kind of fucked this one up because I did not simply go based on albums of my own.
That's okay.
I slightly wish I had. I like that approach. I did bring some props because I have a couple of these, but I'll explain the others. My number 5 is Wood's Songs of Shame. The artwork is like taken from a peak on a mountain, looking outwards down this big canyon. Sun's kind of setting and just says Woods scratched in the bottom right corner. It's super cool. The cover, the name all kind of hooked me, and it subsequently became one of my favorite albums of the last decade. And it's the record I've been trying to buy for probably 5 years, and I can't find it anywhere. It's not in record stores out here. I can't find it online. So if anyone has a lead, I would love to get that record on vinyl. My number 4, I do have. That is the National High Violet. I just love, so I was not a National fan before I heard High Violet. And part of my interest in listening to them was I just thought this album cover was so cool. It's just like so much rage, like scribbled out, and the multicolored rainbow. And I love how when you open up the actual vinyl, you've got the Dessner brothers just looking super serious and in creative thought, and it kind of exemplifies everything I do like about. I understand there are people that find this band insufferable. I find them to be brilliant, and this record is all the reason why for it, and the whole image that's associated with it. Number 3, a record that I just ordered this. It's on its way. One of my favorite Neil Young records, Zuma. This is Cowboy Psychedelic Neil. End of the Ditch trilogy, as he's fading into the late 70s stuff he would do with Crazy Horse before totally turning his music on its head in the 1980s. Just a black and white cover. You've got all this Native American imagery, the horse right in the middle of it. It's unbelievable. Neil Young stuff. Number 2, had to go with a expected choice here. Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. The Blur just says everything. It's everything that if you're a Dylan fan, my way of looking at Dylan is always from like the vantage point of 1966, because there's all the stuff that led up to it, and there's all the stuff that came after. Whatever it is, that peak moment in 1966 is where I always return to with Dylan, and Blonde on Blonde says it all. My number 1, though, happens to also be my favorite record of all time, and that is Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. It looks like a gloomy Chicago November day. Mariner Towers right up on top here. Just all in black and white with this like grayness overhead. Back of it, you've got the Chicago skyline. Just like a perfect image and encapsulation of music in Chicago in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I don't know. I have to look at that record, that album cover, whenever I'm listening to them. Have to. All right. That was fun. That was a really fun one. I think that this is our last segment before we jump into new albums.
Yes.
So thanks to everyone who's been hanging with us. If you have your own favorite album covers, please don't hesitate to share it with us. We would love to hear it. Last category is super fun. Top 5 albums from a band Fish has covered. This came to us from Brian Blank 20 at Brian Blank 20. I love this category because this really exemplifies everything that the podcast is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave, who did you pick and what did you do?
I picked the Smashing Pumpkins. I'm a big fan. Obviously, we talked about earlier how Fish covered Rhinoceros in Deer Creek in 98. So top 5, I'm going to count down from the best and not so best. Number 1, I have Siamese Dream. I mean, number 1A could be Gish. I'll put that as my number 2. You can flip-flop them. They're both amazing records. Either way, you win. If held at gunpoint, I'm putting Siamese Dream at number 1 just because Cherub Rock is probably one of my favorite songs of all time. One of my favorite guitar solos of all time. That song just encapsulates everything that made the Smashing Pumpkins so unfucking believable in the early 90s. So I got Siamese Dream at number 1. Number 2 then would be Gish. That's the album that Rhinoceros is off of. You also get amazing songs like I Am One and Siva. Side B gets more ballady. Number 3, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Of course, the big double disc that went platinum several times. Very, that had all the singles, of course, Bullet Butterfly Wings, Zero, 1979, Tonight, just endless. Little long, understandably. That was like the first 3 Pumpkins records are classics on top of classics. Big gap. Number 4, Adore, which I know Brian loves. I don't. It's good.
Amazing record.
It's fine. It's kind of a little depressing. It's kind of like Billy Corgan's Answer to the Cure. Listen to a lot of Robert Smith. Got a little it's good. I like it more.
Drum Machine, man. Drum Machine.
Well, yeah, Drum Machine, because they had to kick Jimmy Chamberlain out of the band momentarily.
Ava Adore's drum riff or drum track is one of my favorite things I've heard from the Pumpkins.
Yeah, but that's when he like shaved his head and tried to be like Nosferatu in the video. That was
I know.
Goth Pumpkins. Wasn't feeling it.
I'm gonna ride for that record and Machina forever.
So number 5 Smashing Pumpkins album, I have take your pick. They don't have 5 great albums. They've got 3 great albums, 1 fine album, and then it's whatever strikes your fancy. My favorite might be Oceania, which I think came out in 2012. It's got 4 or 5 really decent tracks on it. I know Brian would say Machina and the Machines of God from 2000.
Yes, I would.
I think that album is a shit show on top of a shit shingle and a shit sandwich. But so, yeah, Siamese Dream, Gish, Melancholy of Door, and Oceania, which I'm guessing that no one's actually listened to this podcast has heard of until now. It's not that bad.
Actually, all right. I remember you had me listen to it. It's a good record.
Yeah.
I loved the Smashing Pumpkins in the 90s, and once Machina came out, and I love that record. Once they broke up, I didn't necessarily follow their latter work. One thing I admire about you as a listener is you will listen to any band that you've ever cared about's newest record, even if you know it's not going to be impressive. It is something that I sometimes fall off with and have to play a lot of catch up.
Billy Corrigan definitely strains one's fandom. I mean,
he does.
He's the American Morrissey. He's a fucking asshole. But
yeah.
I just like the first 2 Smashing Pumpkins records too much. That short of him, like, I don't know, killing somebody.
Right. You're gonna keep going.
Yeah.
I hear you. All right. So my artist I decided to go with here was Neil Young. Partially because Fish has covered Neil Young a bunch of times, but also because I just recently did a listening project listening to every Neil Young album in a row. So it's at the top of my mind. Number 5, Zuma. This is the end of the Ditch trilogy, songwriting brilliance right after the end of it. Some of my favorite Neil Young songs are on this record, including Barstool Blues, which is up there with Powderfinger as one of my favorite Neil Young songs ever. Number 4, Rust Never Sleeps, Thrasher, plus just other assorted greatness. It's a outstanding late 70s studio record that would produce an even better live record. But before we get to that, number 3, Year of the Horse. It's from 1997. Broken Arrow tour, correct?
Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly behind where
Begins with track When You Dance, You Can Really Love.
From Hartford, Connecticut.
Connecticut. You were at the show, right?
No, I was not. It was
okay.
Dark and stormy night. It was played in like a blinding rainstorm. I probably should have gone.
Well, it's from the Hartford Meadows, correct?
Yeah, that was the Meadows. The Meadows opened the year before. I was 16 years old.
I like that venue. I saw Fish there in 2010. It's a serviceable.
It's a shed.
Shed, yeah. It's got a nice lush lawn with a good amount of space. But Neil walks out on stage for the opening track, and someone screams to him, "They all sound the same." And Neil goes, "It's all one song, man." And that exchange is like that's why you love Neil Young. Number 2, Live Rust. I mean, this begins with a Neil Young acoustic set before moving into an electric set. You've got a full run of Powderfinger, Cortez, Cinnamon Girl, Like a Hurricane, Hey Hey My My, and Tonight's the Night to close the record out. It's
pretty good. That
it's just the entire sound I always want from Neil Young. And number 1, Tonight's the Night. I mean, just look at this. I mean, we've seen like the brilliance of the front cover.
Yeah.
But just look at the sinister look of all these guys sitting backstage. There's so much griminess in here. It's literally rock.
What's funny is that now that I think about it, it's kind of like an alt universe at the back of like the Allman Brothers and Phil Maurice cover.
Oh yeah, it's a good comp. So Thank you all, you guys, for hanging out with us, as well as for everyone who suggested top 5 lists. Before we go, we want to give you guys a quick primer on new album recommendations here. I went with something that came out actually about a month and a half ago that spent some time talking with one of our future guests about earlier this week. Remembered how much I love this record and how sad I am that this artist came out with this excellent record at the start of 2020, had a tour booked for the entirety of the spring into the summer. It's unfortunately been canceled. And it's something I want to just like keep in mind as we're moving through this whole period. Everyone's going through a lot, obviously. In the best of times, in normal times, artists are coming out with new records that they're working incredibly hard on. Many of them are people that none of us have ever heard of. Something connects, they go on a tour, and it can change their lives completely. And it's just really unfortunate that that's taking a pause right now for a lot of artists, a lot of our favorite artists, one of which is the record I want to talk about here. That's Squirrel Flowers, I Was Born Swimming. So this was the debut record from Ella O'Connor Williams. This came out in, I think, either late January or early February. It's been one of my favorite records of the whole year. It's really gorgeous. It's very hushed. It's a very insightful record. It's kind of like a modern Leonard Cohen take on songwriting. But the cool thing about this record is, you have this very solo, acoustic, hushed vibe to it, but there's a really incredible backing band behind Williams. There's soundscapes and there's this wildness to the record that I just cannot get enough of. This was produced by Gabe Wax, who has worked with the War on Drugs, Soccer Mommy, and Adrian Lenker. Some of our favorite artists that have been making some really great records over the last couple of years. You get shoegaze guitars and fantastic uses of tone throughout, which just makes it this very wondrous listen. And like I said, this is not your typical singer-songwriter record in the sense that it's not just like hushed and straightforward in a lot of ways where the lyrics are the guiding point. You can listen to this and just from a musical standpoint, get a lot out of it. But also, I would kind of align it with kind of the work Adam Granshield was doing on why am I forgetting his record from 2008? One what came out before Slave Ambient?
Wagon Wheel Blues?
Yes, Wagon Wheel Blues, where you hear an artist who clearly has a ton of ideas in their head, does not have the budget to do all of those ideas. So they're like 1 or 2 records away from brilliance. You can hear all the sounds that are going through Williams's head, even in spite of her lack of a full recording budget. And it's just a very exciting experience for the listeners. So loved this record. Dave, what do you got?
I have an album I started listening to this weekend that I think came out this past Friday by a man named James Elkington. The album is called Ever Roving Eye. James Elkington is probably best known as being Steve Gunn's right-hand man. If you've ever seen Steve Gunn live, James Elkington is the skinny British guy to his left, taking a lot of the guitar solos and playing, has like a stand-up lap steel as well. Very accomplished musician. So I think this is his second solo album, and it sounds a lot like a Steve Gunn record, except with a British guy singing as opposed to Steve Gunn. And it's very similar acoustic guitar flourishes, excellent production, good story songs. I listened to it twice through. I loved it. I got to listen to it some more. But certainly if you happen to be a fan of pleasant acoustic music you can put on in the background and appreciate and enjoy it, I haven't think about too much, I would recommend this album highly from what I've heard of it so far. That's Ever Roving Eye by James Elkington.
It's a good record. I gave it a spin this morning and dug it.
Nice.
So we want to thank you guys all for hanging with us here. We wanted to do something a little bit different here, as it's late both on the East Coast and even starting to get late here in Mountain Standard Time. I think we're going to just dive into a listen of the island tour. I may tweet out a few thoughts here, but I'm not going to do a proper tweet deep dive. Maybe we'll do that next week here. I want to give you guys quick insight into stuff that's coming out for us here over the next couple of weeks. So we've got a new episode going live, episode 94, this Tuesday, April 7th. I'm very excited about this episode. I think Dave will share in this, and I think you guys will understand this when it comes out. it really is soothing and fitting for this time. I'm very excited for people to get this episode, listen to this jam, listen to some of these selections, and be calmed down a little bit. I think we can all use some bliss and some calm.
Absolutely.
As we've noted, we're going to focus a ton on jams over the next couple of months. We've got a really cool episode in the works. We're going to do another artist deep dive with one of our close friends. But we are going to do a ton of jams, some 2.0s, even 1 or 2 3.0 jams. We're really excited about what's coming out here this spring as we march towards our 100th episode, for which we've got something very exciting planned as well. Who do we work for?
Osiris Media. Seriously, Osiris, they're killing it in like the live stream game. If you've pay attention to the Osiris YouTube feed, they've been really working overtime during this time of quarantine and uncertainty and strangeness to try to get you some interesting live streams, try to take your mind off a few things. There's definitely plenty more coming, so keep your eye on the Osiris YouTube page. And we're actually going to be back in a week, next Sunday at 9 o'clock. This will be on April 12th. And this is when you're going to want to pay attention to.
We got a very special guest in the works that we're very excited to chat with, and we're excited to present to you guys. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I think we'll do a show deep dive with this guest. We're working out the details right now, but that will be same time next week, 4/12 at 9 p.m. Eastern. So with that, Dave, this was fun, man. I'm glad to have learned as much as I did about your love for cereal, as well as your affinity for Mets baseball games, as well as your favorite album covers. I think we did good here.
An honorable mention for cereal, Post Blueberry Morning. It's kind of like Honey Bunches of Oats, except it's got little freeze-dried blueberries. Not that easy to find. It's part of like the Great Grain series. It's I actually learned, friend of the pod, PJ Rudolph, used to work in marketing for Post. And he said that Blueberry Morning comes from 2 different factories. You can tell by looking at the box. And one of them gets like fresher blueberries, and the other one, this is like the weird secrets when you like work in the cereal industry. So that's a good one. Anyway, Brian, really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, man. We'll do this again next week. Hope all of you and your families are well. Quick shout outs to Sam Timberg, Scotty King, Ryan Smith for hanging with us here throughout the whole thing. You guys are great people, great friends. We appreciate all of you guys. We appreciate all you who are checking into BTP and appreciating what we do. We will be back on Tuesday with episode 94.
Tuesday, episode 94. Excellent jam, excellent show that I was actually at, so I'll be able to tell some good stories for you in that episode. And come back with us next Sunday night at 9 o'clock. We will be live with a very special guest. We'll go beyond the pond.